Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Southside Stories, continuing our quest to have interesting conversations with business leaders, entrepreneurs, founders from this part of London. And I'm delighted to say that today the conversation is with Marta. Hello, Marta. Welcome to Southside Stories.
Hi, Matt. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Great to have you. Great to have you. So, Marta, tell us a little bit about yourself, perhaps where you're based. Just give us as well the elevator just pitch on the company. And of course, we're going to talk about that in some more depth, but just give us the kind of the elevator pitch on you and the company.
Sounds great. So I'm a microbiologist by training, and was an academic for a while, but now I've gone on to become a co-founder of a diagnostics company. So we're based in the biscuit factory in Bermondsey. We've been here for almost 5 years. 11th of June is our 5th birthday. And the
Great.
company basically focuses on at-home diagnostic tests. So we do blood tests, stool tests, urine tests, all sorts of diagnostics. And we also do a lot of wellness stuff. So we do microbiome testing. So we do gut, oral, and vaginal microbiome testing. And then separately, but in connection to all that, we also do a lot of R&D. So we do machine learning style of R&D on huge data sets to come up with new types of diagnostic tests that are at home and non-invasive and generally microbiome based. So I could tell you lots about that. Yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get into that because it's a fascinating area, and I sort of my previous sort of full time job was for Humour, who were a digital health UK company. They weren't doing what you're doing in terms of diagnostics and tests and so on, but they were involved in rolling out digital health services in the UK NHS, but also Europe and also the US. So I know a little bit about the background. It's a very interesting area. Did you go straight into this from academia? What was the story there?
Yeah. So I met my co-founder at Imperial College 10 years ago. And we were both there as academics and were put together by a very smart boss who said, you guys have sort of skill sets that match. And so we worked on a project together, and then we found each other. We found that we worked on multiple projects at Imperial. And then eventually we were at this place, which is an automation kind of friendly lab that basically makes any kind of experiment be able to be miniaturized and made high throughput using robots. So we got a lot of experience doing that. And then for ages we were saying, oh, we should start a company. Everybody else around us was starting companies. And so finally we were like, okay, let's do this. So we thought, yeah, let's do an automation startup to kind of help companies to use robots to make their experiments cheaper and more robust and reproducible. But it was during COVID. So not really many people were in the lab or working except for one kind of lab testing, which was COVID testing. So we ended up pivoting and building an ultra high throughput COVID testing platform, for which we then built a diagnostic lab at the biscuit factory. And then we did a lot of testing over 2 years. So that's how we started, kind of a bizarre route. And we are not where we thought we would be, but in a really cool place that we love being in.
Well, that sounds great, and we're going to talk about a little bit more about that in a second. I'm curious because I guess when you think of bioscience and the area that you're operating in, location-wise, I guess mean, I don't know if this is true, but I think of sort of Cambridge, Oxford kind of corridor and that sort of area. Why Bermondsey, out of interest?
So we wanted to stay in London. We came from Imperial, and then we looked around London for places to rent a lab. And there weren't that many at that time. Now there are more and more because I think London is investing more into biotech, kind of making it a biotech hub to sort of rival the other two cities you mentioned. But But at the time, there wasn't anything really available, especially for small businesses. There were some things for bigger ones. So we knew another company that started up at the biscuit factory called Lab Genius. And they said, hey, these guys let us build a lab. You guys should do that too. So we did.
That's great. So I've got a picture of it in my head. I mean, when you say lab, I mean, if I walked into that lab, just give me a feel for what it looks like, how big, and yeah.
So we actually have 3 labs, and I'm so bad at square meters,
Me
so I
too.
won't be able to tell you the square meter size. But there's sort of like large rooms. They're meant to be single offices, so offices for about 8 people, 8 to 10 people. So that's kind of the size of the rooms. Some of them slightly bigger. But yeah, as you walk in, like I said, most of what we do is use automation and robots. So you won't see that many people. You'll see a lot of kind of smaller and larger plastic glass boxes with pipettes moving around on their own. Um, yeah, so the way we split the labs up is one is for blood testing, one is for molecular testing, especially DNA extraction, PCR, and then the third lab is our genomic suite. So that's where we do all the sequencing and DNA genomics, I guess, metagenomics for microbiome.
And are they very sterile areas? They're sort of custom fit out for you.
They
Yeah.
were, yeah, they were a little bit of a custom fit out. We don't do that much culturing of anything, which means growing any kind of organisms. So we don't need the extra layer of biosafety. So we everything that we have is inactivated. Anything that comes, we break it up, and we just want the DNA. So it's very clean area. So the benches have to be a special type of material that nothing can kind of leach into. And we do have biosafety cabinets, which basically are kind of these big glass boxes with air circulating, and that allows us to keep a sterile environment inside.
Great. Okay. Well, let's switch now then to the proposition, and let's make sure that we've got a proper understanding of that. So you talked a little bit about some of the testing you do, but tell us a little bit more about that. And this is probably the wrong terminology, but what's the practical kind of application of some of those tests?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start the same way as I started before. So in terms of blood tests, I mean, we've all kind of done a diagnostic test for, vitamins or liver function. So we
Yeah.
do those kinds of tests. And I should mention also we're B2B, so we don't do any direct to consumer sales. We work with clinics or pharmacies or nutritionists. Sometimes we work with academics, but we don't sell kind of to the public. So yeah, those are blood tests that you might get from a pharmacy. Let's say if you do a finger prick test and you mail it somewhere, that might come to us. The microbiome tests, there's 3 different ones that we offer. So, and we built them ourselves, and we do them here on site. So there's a gut one, there's a vaginal microbiome test, and then there's an oral microbiome test that we offer. And each one of them has different kind of information that it can give you. So for example, the oral microbiome, it'll give you the breakdown of all the microbes in your mouth. It'll compare that component, all the components that we found in your sample to kind of a healthy average. And then we have some risk scores. So we have a risk score for gingivitis and periodontitis. Periodontitis, many people don't know, but it's actually really heavily associated with inflammation, whole body inflammation, and a whole suite of different conditions. So it's really important to try and stay away from periodontitis, everyone. And there's also a risk score for halitosis, which is bad breath, and for candida overgrowth, which is basically yeast overgrowth in the mouth. And then there's also a few things like how good are the bacteria in your mouth at producing acid, which is not always a great thing, or also how good are they at breaking down sugar. And then there's some kind of a slight touch advice on what you might think about doing to improve these. But the idea here is that, a dentist could use this test, or even anyone could use it and say, okay, I have this risk, so maybe I should book in a visit to the dentist because it seems like I'm at a really high risk of periodontitis here. Yeah.
Let's stick with the dentistry. I want to go to gut health as well because that sounds interesting. But let's just stick with this area first and the sort of dentistry angle. How do you sort of derive a business model? Because I'm thinking like when I go to the dentist, they have a prod around and they, get the mirror out and they do the little kind of physical tests, almost scraping and so on. I mean, I haven't. At what point, what stage, or what would you like that process to be? Would it be that one of the first things they do is offer some kind of test based on, I guess it's a swab or something, is it, from the mouth?
It's just a saliva test, so you spit into a tube. So the idea, I guess, here is either to use the test to get people into the dentist, or also to get people, once they leave the dentist and they have a new regimen, as a checkup, they could do the test to say, hey, this has actually improved quite a bit. Some dentists can also use it for very specific reasons when they're looking for a specific type of microbe. So once you have a little bit more knowledge, you can use a lot more of the insights of the test as well if you are the dentist. I mean, I think if you are also very good at research and Googling, you might come to the same insights as well, as just anyone. But yeah, the idea is basically for people to use this test to get faster oral care and to make sure that whatever intervention they have has worked. Or if it hasn't worked, then they have to go back and try again. But at least it's an at-home test, so it makes it a bit easier than having to book a visit.
So I guess the sort of flow would be: I go to the dentist, I have a saliva test, either there or later after some kind of program of treatment. And then I guess the model would be I would send that back to the dentist, or basically back to you, because you're always going to go via the dentist, aren't you? Because the dentist needs to look at the results and then adjust the program or decide actually you're not really following what I told you to follow or something like that.
Yeah, so the person would mail the kit. It goes directly to our lab, and then we would release the result to their dentist. And also, if they choose, so we can release the results to them as well. So it depends on who's buying this and how they want it delivered.
Yeah. Let's switch to, I'm going to kind of come back to that as we talk about sort of developing the business and your sort of B2B, proposition, which is kind of an interesting area for you because it's where the brutal reality of commerce and sales kind of rears its head. But before we go there, just tell us about the gut test and what that does, or what it could predict or look at.
Yeah, so the gut test is fairly similar to the shotgun oral microbiome test. Shotgun is the technology we use for these tests, shotgun sequencing. So in the gut one, of course, you can have kind of you find all the microbes that are present in the sample. That can be really informative to professionals such as nutritionists, for example. They would look at that list. We also have a list of kind of key species that are associated with health. And then if you're missing some of those, we say, hey, you're missing some of these guys. You might want to think about some probiotics that include X, Y, and Z types of species. We don't at the moment recommend any specific brands. We just say which types of things to look for in probiotics. There's also a pathogen section, so it tells you, that our database is 26,000 microbes. We don't list all 26,000 microbes. We just list the ones we find. And so in the pathogen section, you might find some microbes that we've identified as being associated with pathogenesis, like H. pylori, for example, which is associated with ulcers, stomach ulcers. And then we have the most interesting part for me, anyway, is the insights that we generate using our machine learning. So we have a health risk for Crohn's and for colitis. They're actually quite accurate. So in the other part of our company, we're moving towards taking that into being a diagnostic test. At the moment, it's part of the wellness platform and a wellness test, but it is pretty robust. So the Crohn's and colitis test risk score, there's an obesity risk score, I think a diabetes risk score, and one other, and we're still adding on more. What's really interesting there also is that we can couple the microbiome test with a bunch of other diagnostic tests, for example, calprotectin or fit testing that people would already do, as alongside also symptoms. And then we kind of put that all into a holistic package that kind of gives pretty good insights at that point about where you're at. I think most of the time, this test can be used, well, it can be used by anybody, but it's really helpful if you have any types of gut issues and if you want to eliminate specific things from being the causative agent of those issues.
What's your because there are what's the differentiation? Is it in the tests themselves and what they can pick up, or is it in the speed, or is it the robotics side that might provide some competitive advantage? What's the story there?
So in terms of differentiation for the gut, because that is the most popular test, for the gut microbiome one, I think we are the only report. We have the only report that has those machine learning derived insights, which are really accurate. We are probably about the same price. We use the cutting edge technology. So a lot of people use a technology called amplicon sequencing. It's a lot cheaper, but it's not nearly as insightful or as detailed. And what we're starting to see more and more, and people are publishing a lot more now, is that you need that level of detail to get some meaningful insights, rather than just like healthy or unhealthy. That is good to know, but it only kind of takes you so far. And then in terms of the automation, it makes everything a lot more reproducible, less mistakes, and faster.
Great. I'm going to ask you a bit of a. I've only just thought of this, but and this might be a bit of a strange question, but you know when cause some of this sort of reminds me. Let me phrase this carefully, because what's popped into my head is Theranos.
Yes.
And I'm really sorry to bring that name up, but I think because they were about kind of miniaturization, weren't they, and rapid testing. But I'm sure there's some fundamental differences with what you do. But.
Well, I mean, the main difference is that we're trying to innovate in the microbiome space, whereas they were innovating in the blood space. And the whole thing there was that they were trying to use a drop of blood for like loads and loads of tests.
Yeah.
So it's I think the idea is fabulous. I would love for them to have succeeded. And I think that eventually that will be possible. They were really early. They're too early, basically. The technology was not there. The technology is still not there yet, but it's getting closer. Yeah. So I think we are a very legit diagnostic lab.
Of course
and
you are.
So
yes.
Everything has to be validated and proven to be correct. And there is the nice thing about automation is that it does allow for some degree of miniaturization, because the robots will just be very precise at picking out small volumes, whereas maybe for people it might be a little bit more time consuming, and then you can start making mistakes. Yeah. So yes, but great question. I'll have a think about that.
Well, I'm sure you're much more credible on that. But actually, it's a good segue into clinical validity. Actually, what does that look like? Clinical evidence, or being able to have some kind of backup to the claims that you're making around some of the testing? What does that look like?
Yeah. So uh, for the test that, I mean, the blood test is pretty simple. You kind of test against another lab and you need to compare results. And if they're the same, then you're good to go. But for all the microbiome tests that we are developing, there's a whole series of things you need to do to make sure that what you're getting is real, especially because there are multiple different steps in this, some of which are in the lab and some of which are in silico. So they're all kind of bioinformatic analysis based steps, which can also have some, um, you can make mistakes there as well, basically. So the first thing to do whenever developing a new test, you need to see if there are any standards. So you purchase sort of fake samples where or everything is enumerated, so you know exactly how much of everything is in there, and then you put that sample through your process, and at the end of the day you need to get that result. If you're not getting that result, then that's not
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
And so we've done that with basically every standard available for microbiome under the sun. We even tried to make our own. We've worked with the National Measurement Laboratory to do standards work. So we put loads of effort into trying to make sure that we're seeing exactly what is in each sample.
yeah.
Another thing that is interesting to do is you can do cross lab comparisons. So we have done that. Um, but in that sense, you're only as good. I mean, the result is only as good as the other lab. So if the other lab makes a mistake, it may not be you, it might be them in this
Yeah.
case. So the sort of using standards and using controls in every single process is something that is, I think, essential when you're trying to do this stuff.
And is there some regulatory body over the top of that that sort of is monitoring or is auditing? And who is that
Um,
authority?
Yeah, so for diagnostic testing, that authority is UCAS, so the United Kingdom Accreditation Service. So they will accredit labs to an ISO standard. So we're accredited to ISO 17025 for testing labs,
Mm-hmm.
and that they accredit for specific tests. The microbiome has, to my knowledge, not been accredited. Microbiome testing is not accredited yet, but that will change, and we would like to be the first accredited microbiome lab in
Mm-hmm.
the UK. Um, in terms of diagnostic testing, there is a different accreditation body. So in the UK, it would be MHRA,
Yeah,
which is you know what that is.
yeah.
So for our Crohn's and colitis microbiome test, we are going to be submitting all our documentation to MHRA to make it a diagnostic test. Um, yeah.
Great, robust answer there. Just for my benefit, I mean, Crohn's disease, I've heard of. It's a pretty nasty disease, isn't it? Colitis, is that to do with the colon or something? What is that one?
Yeah, so it's ulcerative colitis and Crohn's are often mistaken. They're both IBD, so inflammatory bowel disease, but they're two different types of inflammatory bowel disease with different causes, but very similar symptoms, um, and often really hard to distinguish between the two.
And I guess that's critical because the treatment is different, is it, for each? Okay, so that's
Yeah.
really a critical test. Okay, interesting. Yeah. Let's switch because you've got, okay, so that's great. So you've got this great clinically validated, you're in the middle of accreditation and various stages of the accreditation. So very, not like Theranos at all, very robust, very credible. You've got some clear differentiation. So that's all fantastic. Tell me a little bit now about the business sort of side and what the business model and how you hope to take this forward, because I guess there are lots of labs out there that are just happy to receive sort of inbound samples. They do the testing on behalf of, I don't know, big hospitals, etc. But I think you're going a slightly different direction, are you, to that?
Yeah, I think we are maybe more in the wellness and preventative health space. So unusually for labs, we both we can perform all the diagnostic tests that are generally found in a diagnostic lab, but then we also have this microbiome component, and we're building everything to be at home. So they're all kind of like, if you remember doing COVID testing, at home tests, so you kind of mail it back to the lab and you don't have to step outside your home. Although you would want to do that on such a nice day as today. But yeah, so I guess the business model for us, we work with very different types of clients. So we work with some pharmacies, we work with nutritionists, we work with some dentists, some academics. So it really depends on which kind of test we're selling. Yeah, sorry, you were gonna say.
No, that's kind of, it's quite a wide pool, isn't it? Because you could go in a lot of different directions with this. Because I guess, the dentistry and going to B2B into dentistry might be very different from working with nutritionists, let's say. Or is it? I don't know. Maybe it's not. But are you thinking we'll go broad and then find a sweet spot? Is that part of the strategy?
Yeah,
or
I think so. And it's just, so we sell to these different types of, I guess, types of customers, and we're at different stages with each of these sectors. So we find some sectors are much more sort of early adopters. So your sort of functional medicine practitioners and nutritionists are really early adopters, and they, some nutritionists are buying our oral microbiome test because they know that it's a really good indicator of inflammation, which then causes all sorts of other things that they can treat. So that is a sector that's much more developed and accepts using both diagnostics and wellness tests at the same time. I think to take the example of dentists, nobody has ever talked about oral microbiome until a few years ago. Dentists know that it exists, but they haven't really covered it at medical school, probably until recently. And they're just not sure what to do with this. So there's a large component of education that we have to do. So they're actually quite keen, but they just need to kind of understand how to best use this test. Similar with GPs. So we have a few GPs that are using our gut microbiome test. So we've had to kind of work with them to say, hey, if you see this, you might want to think about this. Or if you see that, you might want to do these other tests. So depending on which sector we're talking about, we're like further ahead or a little bit behind in. And then just to touch on the Crohn's and colitis test that we're planning on making an IVD, so an in vitro diagnostic test, that kind of opens up a very different market, which would be sort of very standard medicine where, hospitals, doctors, anybody could use this test and would trust it because it has that IVD mark.
those categories, so there's an awful lot of dentists in the UK. There's a lot of GPs. There's quite a lot of nutritionists as well. How do you approach? Because they're big sectors, aren't they? How do you approach getting in to see them and doing that sales process across 3 or 4 different categories?
Yeah, that is a great question. Well, I guess we kind of actually, the sectors, I don't want to say the sectors don't matter, but they matter less than I expected. And that's because it's mostly selling to people that know about microbiome work and have used it, or that don't know anything about microbiome and have no idea how to use it. And so those are kind of the 2 types of sales.
Yeah.
I think.
It must be much easier, isn't it, to go to an audience that you don't have to educate them, because you've got to educate them first. You've got to do all of that piece before you can get to, now let me talk to you about, our solution.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. But I think we're kind of, now we've sort of seen what works, what doesn't work in terms
Yeah.
of the education piece. And it's not that, you don't have to do that much. I mean, a very solid 1 hour webinar telling people kind of the background and then what this does and how it helps can bring people across the line. So we've been doing more webinars, which I never thought we would be doing, but it seems to be working quite well. Yeah.
Yeah, well, they're a great way, aren't they, of getting a lot of information over and being able to field questions and doing it, one to many and not having to go around individuals. So that sounds a great strategy. Yeah, let's switch then to sort of your ambition. Where would you like to take it, say, in the next couple of years?
I love this question. Thank you. Where I would like to take this is I would love for Crohn's and colitis to be approved and have rolled out so we can get treatment to people much more quickly. And with the same method, so we have this kind of diagnostic discovery platform that we built with the machine learning and microbiome data. So the next target that we're targeting is endometriosis, which affects 1 in 10 women, and it's 8 to 10 years to diagnose. There's no need to do that. If we can get a test to people much more quickly, it will expedite their treatment process. I mean, the treatment is still very invasive, but at least they don't have to be on that waiting list for as long and trying to figure out what it is that they have. So yeah, the dream is we start rolling out these sort of meaningful diagnostic tests that people can do at home. They're not insanely expensive. We can send them to anywhere in the world, and then work with other labs to kind of spread the news.
Some founders I speak to, they're all purpose driven, which is a bit of a cliche to say purpose driven, I guess. But you have founders always have a vision, and it's often about fixing a knotty problem and solving it. But there are some founders that are sort of, they stay with that problem. They really obsess about getting that solution done. And then there are other founders that have something, a vision or a product, whatever it is. And they're slightly more geared to the business, going through the VC stages, scaling and, getting to a high valuation. And sometimes they're on sort of two sides of the pendulum. Where would you say you fall, if that's a fair question to you?
It's a very fair question. I think I don't have a choice. I think we have to fall on the funding side because this work is so expensive. So we need the backing of VCs or very nice angels, let's say, so that we can fund all of the clinical validations and regulatory approval work.
Yeah.
How
are you currently funded?
We've had one angel round, so friends and family round, back when we started the company, and we're actually raising a seed round right now for the clinical validation and regulatory approval of the first diagnostic. So we're kind of a quarter of the way there. But everyone has said it's a very hard market right now for funding, and I'm finding out that is pretty true. Yeah.
Yes, I did for a couple of years out of Singapore advising on digital health. And if I went back, the first year after COVID, where interest rates were low, the interest in, all of this stuff went through the roof. And I can't remember the figures now. It's like something like $50 to $55 billion worth of funding. China huge, US big. It has got a lot harder, isn't it? But when you talk about what's your approach to seed funding, you've obviously got a figure in mind of you. What sort of number? I don't know if you can share that, but what kind of number have you got in mind that you'd like to complete for seed?
So the number for us is about £2 million.
Yeah.
And that will get us to product launch and halfway through the endometriosis test process. So it's quite a lot of work. Yeah.
And how many seed funders or VCs would you need, do you think, to get to your 2 mil target?
That's a great question. I think some VCs can cover the whole thing.
Yeah.
Some VCs will do much smaller tickets.
Yeah.
I think on average, the first investment, from what I've been told, which is, very anecdotal, is about $500,000
Right.
for a seed. Unless they really, if you're in their portfolio and you fit well, and I think if you have all of that, what they're looking for, maybe they will do the whole ticket. That is in the UK. I think in the US it's a much different story. We have not really done much fundraising in the US, but are considering it now because it's just a little bit difficult in the UK to raise the funds.
Yeah. As the VCs, I'm curious, when you have that conversation with the VC for the seed stage, are they, how interested are they in the numbers, the actual sales and the revenue side? Or are they much more on the, okay, these guys have got something, the proposition is really strong, the new test, endometriosis, big market for that, Crohn's and colitis. Are they more focused on, okay, let's get, the market is there, let's get the seed funding in place to enable you to do what you need to do to get those tests, accredited and all the rest of it? Or how focused are they on the commercial side at the moment?
Yeah, great question. They're kind of half and half, actually. It was before, like when we first did the fundraise, it was all kind of pie in the sky stuff because we were just starting out and they were like, yeah, go and do these amazing things. And we did. But now it's very different. Now people want to see, like, what is your revenue? What's predicted for next quarter, next year. Even though, like, for us, it's a bit strange because our revenue is not based on what we're building. It's kind of two different things. But yeah, they're definitely, people want to see. And I think if we weren't making any revenue, it would be even harder.
Yeah. And I'm sure you will be successful in your raise. When you look to where you deploy that 2 mil, have you got a sort of the big buckets of where clearly what you sort of spoke about before is one of them, getting the test accredited into Indome. What else would you deploy that money around?
Yeah, a big chunk of it is exactly on what you mentioned. In addition to that, it will be growing the team, and then also a little bit of operational expenses. But we're trying to kind of fill the operational expenses up with our revenue anyway. Yeah.
On the team size, what would be your dream next 2 or 3 hires?
Ooh, you have the best questions. Dream hires would be.
Would it be on the more on the the scientific side, or would it be on the biz dev side, or
I will go for one of each.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 people on the research, 1 person biz dev. And in terms of research, I would do 1 person. Not do. I would decide, I think, to get a machine learning expert, and also to potentially get another bioinformatician. So a lot of data heavy skills. Yeah. We have that, but we need more.
Yeah. Marta, tell me what it's like at the moment for you. You started this amazing business. What's your business partner's name, by the way?
Miles Priestman.
Miles. So you started this amazing business with Miles. You got this great traction. It's a bit of a roller coaster, isn't it? Starting a new business. What's it, just emotionally, what's it been like for you over the last couple of years?
Well, it's I guess during COVID times, it was pretty crazy because we were working insane hours. And I think for a year, we didn't have any days off. Truly. So that was crazy. So I think both of us at some point or other experienced some level of burnout without admitting it, I think. And then now we have, yeah, it's very much a roller coaster where some weeks or some days are really good. And then other days it's like, oh my God, we lost this client.
Yeah.
Or, you hope that you go like, let's say with a VC down the road for so many meetings. And then they're like, well, no thanks. So, so
Yeah.
yeah, very much up and down. But then you get like, an email from a patient that used one of our tests that said it really helped, and it just kind of makes it
Yeah.
all worth it. I know it sounds cheesy, but it's true.
No, it's not cheesy because that's. I mean, when you spoke earlier, I mean, solving that issue around endometriosis. I've come across so many people who really have suffered for so long with that. I mean, this stuff is, it's life changing. So, and those stories that validate what you're doing and the potential to do enormous human good there is a great purpose to go for. I'm always curious with startup founders who are so busy and there's so much stuff to do and stress and everything. Do you ever celebrate your success, or you always think, okay, I'm on to the next thing? Do you ever
I think I
get
do
to
a very
experience
bad
that?
job of celebrating,
Yeah.
for sure. I've been told that many times. Just like, okay, what's next? Come on.
Yeah. Is there anybody in your area or digital health or medtech or any, the kind of related areas? Like, is there anybody that you really look up to as a company that you've seen do amazing work and has got great traction in your area?
Um, so in terms of in our area, I guess the big company in the UK, the elephant in the room for gut testing is Zoe.
Okay, I was going to
So
mention Zoe before when you're talking about gut. Yeah.
yeah, and in the States, it's Viome. Um, and I think they both do really great work. We do slightly different things
Because
because
well, Zoe at least is going to consumer, isn't it? It seems to be
yeah,
most of its
they're direct to
businesses.
consumer
Yeah.
and they're really focused on lifestyle and nutrition.
Yeah.
So their reports and the way they analyze and the kind of insights that they provide, it's all about changing your diet or and your lifestyle a little bit. So and we're kind of going in a very different way, which is very medical.
Yeah.
So we want to be making diagnostic tests. I think there's use and both ways of approaching this are really important. But I think Zoe's done an amazing job of making people aware of the gut microbiome. Um, and Viome in the States also has done quite well. Also Seed in the States, another one that's making people more aware of microbiome modulation.
Yeah.
And just one mention of a kind of an interesting company called Evie, which that company does vaginal microbiome testing, and they've really brought that to the fore and done the educational piece on that. And I really appreciate that because I really like the way that they've kind of made it much more accessible and less taboo.
Yeah, that's great. So you've got a few trailblazers who are doing some. It's almost like they're the scouts. They're kind of almost preparing the market for and helping you as you develop and mature your offering. Great. Okay. Well, we could talk loads more, but I've only got one more question for you, Marta. That was a fascinating conversation. Tell me about. It's similar to the company question, I guess, in a way, which is, is there a leader, a mentor, somebody that's been influential in your life, your professional life, that's had a really positive effect on you?
It's very hard to choose.
Yeah.
Who I would pick. I mean, I could sit here all day and pick amazing people that
Wow.
helped me to get to this
Uh-huh.
place. I maybe if it's okay, I'll mention one person and maybe one other person
Yeah.
quickly.
Sure. Sure.
Um, and they are both people that are associated with our company in some way or
Mm,
another.
mm,
So fairly recent. So one person is Jack Kreindler, who is he's involved and has set up Well Founded, and also just is this amazing doctor with this wealth of knowledge and web of connections where he puts people together in London where he sees like you and you would do well,
oh yeah. Yeah.
and just has these really incredible insights. Um, and actually quite recently in November, he basically put together a whole conference called Leaders in Health. And that was basically, I don't know how many people attended, maybe 200. And each one of those people would be on the list of inspiring people, innovators. And then the other person I was going to mention is somebody that he introduced us to, who is Victoria Sampson from the Health Society. And we've worked really hard with her to build a very good oral microbiome test that she's just taken off and is selling and advising and doing all sorts of things in the oral microbiome world. And she's quite an innovator. She's a dentist. She has a full-time job. And then separately, she just comes out with these fabulous ideas about how what else we could try. So yeah, I'll stop myself there.
No, that's great. So that's two very interesting people you've got there, and we need these people, don't we? When the tough going gets tough, and having inspirational people around us, helping and guiding. Sounds like you've got two great people there. Yeah.
And being able to see kind of where things are going over a multiple kind of landscape of different. I mean, yeah. I bet you see that a lot. You kind of see trends as the more people you speak with and get to know as well.
Well, yeah, I do. I mean, I've had 30 or so, 40 maybe conversations with business owners over the last couple of weeks, and it's interesting that I mean, if you leave the industry specifics to one side, the big two, I think, well, maybe three, but the big two are always if B2B sales is always really hard. It always comes up, and the general sentiment seems to be that it's harder. There are more decision makers involved. The timelines are longer. There's more rigor around the purchasing decision, and I think that's just a symptom of where the economy is right now. It's just flatlining. So there isn't as much money swirling around. So things are a little tighter. And then the other one is always team. It's always finding the right people, holding on to the right people. There's problems, I think, that relate to obviously Brexit, but there's also problems around London. In a sense, we're so skewed in the UK towards London, which is great in some ways, but of course, the cost of living, the job market is quite tight for new talent as well. It still seems to be a sort of candidate market, so that one always comes up a lot at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, all of those echo with me, like, yep, check.
Yeah, they're common ones. Yeah. And then for the SMB segment, who are very susceptible to things like NI, minimum wage, that's been a huge factor since October. I'm not sure what the Chancellor, as we speak today, Rachel Reeves has just done a sort of spring statement as well. So I think quite a people were fearful what's going to be in that as well. But it's a sort of uncertain market. But there are some amazing businesses, and you are for sure one of them. There's so many great businesses in this part of London around sustainability, fintech. There's some incredible talent. So sometimes it feels that we're a bit too gloomy, and we kind of forget just what a powerhouse of innovation there is in the UK and London, especially. So there's reasons to be optimistic as well.
Yeah, definitely. And also, like, one thing that I always notice is there are so many conferences in London, industry conferences, and that's there for a reason. It's because people are here to attend those things.
Yeah. They're a good bellwether. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And the London Tech Week growing year on year, getting bigger and bigger. They always, I think London is a fabulous place for business, especially South London, by the way.
Yeah. No, well, I agree with you there, for sure. Anyway, Marta, it's fabulous to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you as well.
And best of luck with the seed funding. I know it can be challenging, but I think you're gonna smash it. You've clearly got a great story to tell there, so best of luck with that.
Well, thanks so much. You should come visit.
I will, for sure. Thank you so much, Marta.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.